marketplace and hundreds of fan tokens and other things that are floating around. And what we've noticed is that everybody's kind of looking at things in a different way. And there needs to be some logical groupings that occur where we bring domain experts together, and they all kind of just have a focused conversation and discussion about a topic area. We've been doing this internally for things like the Light Wallet. We've been doing this internally for Prism. We've been doing this internally for like a lot of re-architecture stuff of how do we improve the performance of the Cardano node and what features to have. Like, for example, the Light Wallet workshop, we had over 30 people attend. And I think that was either in Portugal or Spain. I can't remember where it was. But it happened when I was in Africa. So we started brainstorming the idea of mini summits that are scoped to a particular domain as an opportunity for dApp developers who are building in that domain to come together, interact with each other, and interact with IO staff members, Emergo staff members, and foundation members. So the first that we're going to try is some form of DEX convention, DEXCon, and bring a lot of the people that are building DEXs on Cardano together. We had a chance to take a look at some of the SundaeSwap stuff. I believe some of our people met with Meld people today, and we've been floating around to provide technical assistance and advice. And of course, a lot of developer questions come up, and everybody has their own different way of viewing various things like automated market making, where liquidity comes from, how to handle your order book pattern, where concurrency comes from, what sits off chain, what sits on chain, and their favorite models on how to do distribution and so forth. And there's a lot of lore in each of these things, these community things. And what's happening is that things are starting to roll out. As you know, the PAB is in the test net, and it's being utilized. People are building with it. And then what's happening is that's leaving, and it's going to mainnet. And at some point, people are very comfortable with it. So probably December, January, just depends on the cycles. And things like Sunday and others will start waking up on Cardano, more likely than not this year. So that's just the first. And what's going to happen is there's going to be lots of evolution and iteration. And it's important that the dApp developers have direct access to the core Plutus team, the Ledger team, and network team and other people, as well as stake pool operators, to kind of have discussions about features they'd like to see, new functionality, and priorities that they have that they need in order for commercialization to work properly. So we're going to have micro summits starting with, I think, a DEX convention. And my hope would be to do that in February, February to March, somewhere in that time frame, right around the Babbage Hartford Combinator event. I think that's enough time for the PAB to reach a certain level of maturity for the next generation of Plutus stuff to come out, and also for the certification program to evolve a bit more. Many of you know that we built Plutus and Cardano with dApp certification in mind. $10.5 billion worth of waste, fraud, and abuse has occurred in the DeFi space in 2021. So one of the things that was a design requirement for Cardano was making sure that when people build dApps on the settlement layer, they have an obvious path to establishing levels of certification in that software. This is very important for the end user because they need visually to be able to look at something and know that that code has gone through some sort of demonstration of quality. And there's been some oversight to look at that. And normally that's done through centralized curation, but it would be nice to have certification levels that are based on formal methods, and they can verify proofs that the thing is correct. And they can look at a lot of blockchain-based stuff. So we've been building that certification ecosystem with partners, Cubic, Tweeg, Well-Typed, Runtime Verification, and Certic are the 5 that we've been talking most to. And there's some security auditors like Kadelsky, Trail of Bits, others that we've had many conversations with throughout the world. QuantStamp was another. And basically the idea is that we can get 3 certification levels. Now, all of the DEXs that have been talking to us, they have either committed to or already are in some process of getting certification, either from Certic or talking to Well-Typed or working with runtime verification. Right around the February-March timeframe, the case semantics for Plutus will be done. And I think we're going to have a lot of great certification tooling, from automated tooling like what Cubic is doing for basic stuff, all the way up to manual certification getting more mature. So design patterns are materializing. We published the blog post on concurrency showing some patterns to use to create concurrency within your application. And every DEX has their own idea of how to achieve concurrency on Cardano for their domain with various different techniques. So it makes a lot of sense to bring them all together, the certification people together, people who host infrastructure together, Plutus developers together, the Plutus core team together, and the DEXs together, the core teams of those people, for a scope-focused event where everybody can kind of talk it through. And I'd like to do this for each dApp category. So it'd be really cool to do this for the DEXs building on Cardano. There's algorithmic stablecoins building on Cardano, oracles building on Cardano, and so forth, NFT marketplaces, these things. And so this is not meant to be a giant public event like the summit with 100,000 people. Rather, it's meant to be a really fun few days for maybe 30 people to 50 people. And the point of the event is really an exchange of ideas and knowledge and an airing of grievances of things that they say we can do better on and build up. Either it be better things to do with the PAB, or it be new features and functionality in Plutus, some syntactic sugar in the language, new libraries for certain things, or other improvements and so forth. This would also be an opportunity to kind of have a lot of community influence on the June and October HFC events. As many of you know, there are going to be 3 HFC events next year: February, June, and October. And a big hallmark is moving all of these into a large, well-distributed open source project to handle these moving pieces. So the February HFC event is fairly saturated for the changes that are coming in. Plutus script compression, a lot of optimizations involving UTXO HD and so forth, and like new things and new functionality. And we're having lots of discussions about Plutus templates and read-only UTXO. Some will be in February, some will be in June, but that's pretty saturated in February for the Babbage fork. But June is not yet saturated. So having events in February would give ample time for an agile development cycle to add some additional features and functionality that certain members think a lot about. It'd also very cool to have a regulatory bend on this, the next generation of DEXs, and get a sense of what would future-proof DEXs in a way to make people more comfortable, and bring in some Voltaire people, because Catalyst provides DAO capabilities. Right now, they're being utilized for Cardano. And all next year, a complete feature set is being built so that you can have an on-chain governance system. But because of the native asset standard that Cardano has, if you issue an asset on Cardano, it's treated like ADA. So that functionally means that you're able to then reuse the governance mechanics that ADA has to run a DAO for your application. And I think this is going to be extremely useful for algorithmic stablecoins and extremely useful for DEXs. So it's very important that all these people come together, they talk to each other, and they have a great time together, and we learn a lot. So my personal preference would be, if there's enough room, to do this in Spain at Alfred's Hotel, Cardano Hotel. I think he'd be a phenomenal host, and maybe we can make that happen. But I'm open for some ideas from the community. And again, the point is just to bring the DEXs together, bring some regulatory ideas together, bring the certification people together, the governance people together, bring the Plutus core team, elements of it together for a few days, and basically have a big workshop, and everybody shares ideas. They get drunk together, they learn a lot of stuff about what they're doing, and then we do a bunch of presentations to kind of showcase some of the things that they're building and doing. I fully expect that in the next 60 days, you're going to see a lot of DEXs turn on in Cardano and some preliminary traffic occurring. So probably NFTs trading and other such things. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a long tail on DEXs, just like you see with Ethereum, with Uniswap and SushiSwap and these other exchanges. Basically, they've gone through multiple iterations. I think Uniswap is already in version 3, for example. And DEXs are going to rapidly iterate and evolve on Cardano as well. So right now is the time to start establishing patterns, best practices, certification standards, and building some standardized on and off-chain infrastructure. Another closely related topic is the Plutus application backend. And we've been having a lot of conversations about building a web-oriented PAB in addition to the Haskell PAB. The original strategy was build once, compile everywhere. So Haskell running on Windows and Linux and Macintosh, but then also in the browser, and then hopefully a path to getting it on cell phones. And we did this through the Asterius project at Twig for GHC to WebAssembly, so Haskell to WebAssembly, and then also the GHC.js project. That's still ongoing, but that's an R&D project as much as it is a commercial project. And so it makes sense to start taking a look at PAB and saying, can a lightweight version of that be built in TypeScript as a JavaScript port? So basically, it's a native JS library and infrastructure. And I think from an open source project, it makes a lot of sense. And there's some complementarity between these two approaches that could mutually be beneficial. I'd like to get that started before the end of the year, and I'd like to have some form of beta available by the first DexCon if we can do that. And then I think that would be a perfect example of where an open source project conversation can happen and serendipity can occur. Now, if this model is successful, I think we can replicate this model, as I said, amongst different DeFi classes that are coming through Cardano, like algorithmic stablecoins and so forth. And basically, it can be events that can be run at a fairly low cost on a fairly regular basis. And it gives people the latest and greatest of state of the art for what's going on in that particular category in different domains. So very multidisciplinary in that respect. And I feel this is something that perhaps the foundation could subsidize and ensure is a reoccurring thing, so they can still have the Cardano Summit, but then there's also these quarterly community events where there's new things coming for developers. So anyway, it's an idea that we've been batting around for a little bit now, and I figured it's gotten to the point where it makes sense to start talking to the community, because DEXs are imminent on Cardano. They're under construction. They're being tested on the testnet. They're getting to a point where they're doing code audits and they're doing performance testing, these types of things. And so as a consequence of that progress, the positive side is the first time ever we get to see it. The negative side is that there's going to be a lot of replication of effort. And unless there's a lot of effort for teams to talk to each other, then what's going to happen is people are going to make the same mistakes again and again. So it's pivotal that in the early nascent days of the dApp ecosystem of Cardano, there's an open, welcoming, very floss-centric, free Libre open source software notion of sharing ideas. Because at the end of the day, we are all in this together. We all have to figure out how to write great Plutus code. We all have to understand where the tooling is great and where the tooling is not so great. We all have to basically solve the same collection of problems, from user experience problems to problems with concurrency and other things. And that's a thought process. There's a lot of moving pieces there, and there's certainly different ways to do it. And commercial ventures will bet on which way is best. But it makes no sense for people to have to rediscover the same technology again and again and again. Our goal is to try to build a great ecosystem and really move quickly. So I think the mini summit, the micro summit idea, is probably the way to accommodate that. And it's something where you could build a lot of great friendships and get to know a lot of people. And we can go to Cardano Mecca, which is the hotel Alfred has, and hopefully there's enough room for something like that. If not, well, at least hang around the area. It'd be a good place to have those conversations. And we can certainly send Dom down there and shoot a bunch of videos and people could talk. A few more things. So as I mentioned, the TypeScript PAB is certainly one thing. The other thing is that we've brought in a new developer into the ecosystem, Splendid. Very unique development house. Splendid is a UI UX developer. They specialize in nothing but user interface design. This is their bread and butter, and they're a very talented firm. One of my big priorities in 2022 is thinking a lot about experiences. So how do we get things to work fast, beautiful, in the browser, on the cell phone? Because we've achieved the correctness goals of the project. We now know all the protocols, the design space, and it's now a conversation about optimization, and it's a conversation about making it pretty usable and functional for the largest set of users possible. So you kind of build that in parallel. So as your performance scales up, your usability scales up, so you get a larger user population for the system. Well, what that means is you have to bring in a diverse set of new actors to kind of worry about various different things. So on Splendid's side, they're going to be working on the dApp store. We have gone through something called the double diamond design process. We did that internally. We did many customer interviews. We talked a lot with different people. We did a ton of market research on how to build a beautiful dApp store. And there were several presentations about this in the Light Wallet section of the Cardano Summit back in September. Well, now the time has come to escalate that and have some domain experts come in who do nothing but build beautiful GUI and have them basically figure out how to transform the ideas that we have into a fully usable and functional user interface. Now, UI design is something where it's deceptively simple and deceptively complicated. So it's simple from the perspective that you can make very fast progress. 2 to 3 weeks, you can have something that you can bring up on a browser or a cell phone app, demo and play with, and potentially be very functional. It's deceptively simple in that while you can do that very quickly, to refine it and to get to a fully usable state could take dozens of iterations. So you may end up spending quite a long time. So it's important to start that process once you have a really good foundation. It's deceptively complex because there's a tendency to try to complicate user interface. You try to do too many things at the same time. When you look at the wallet ecosystem, you have a voting center, and you have a dApp store, you have a delegation center, you have the wallet interfaces, and that has to be multi-currency. You have the hardware wallet center, and then you have third-party plugins that fit in, and then there's probably there's an identity center and so forth. So there's a lot of these moving pieces that are there, and each and every one of them actually has to have a unique experience and contains a bundled module. For example, the identity center will carry Prism. The voting center has to interface with Catalyst, but then potentially be modularizable to work with third-party applications. You need a dApp connector, so the dApps in the dApp store, once acquired, can communicate with the wallet, identity, voting, and other infrastructure, because that's one of the USPs of unifying these things together. Now, we spent about 9 months talking about how this architecture is going to fit together with the Light Wallet next generations of Daedalus. And we have real good technological ideas of that architecture and the roadmap and progress and how you can roll things out in 3 to 6 week cadences and add this in. And each of those is a GUI discussion as well. What should voting look like? Which these delegation centers look like in a world of partial delegation where you can delegate to multi-pools and so forth. So this is the job of Splendid working with us, is to start with the dApp store, and then hopefully we'll negotiate working through the other modules, and we can kind of get a good sense of where do we sit. So the micro summits fit into this idea because we can also have a user experience question with everybody, bring people together and basically talk about these things and figure these things out. And so 2022 is going to be a lot of that. There's going to be many events, many dApps are coming out. Plutus is here. Smart contracts are running on Cardano. There's a lot of updates happening very quickly, and things are quite malleable. And at the same time, there's all this scaffolding being put in and institutions being empowered to build out this great open source corpus for Cardano that is going to be multi-layered. So it starts from the scientific papers to the formal specifications and protocol specifications to the consensus logic and node logic and ledger logic and transaction logic. And then you just kind of work your way up the stack. And each and every level requires a different governance system and governance approaches in order to achieve efficient execution. It's been working well because it's a fairly vertically integrated stack with 12 companies kind of piling in. But that has to open up because the dApp developers are going to become contributors to the protocol as much so as the core developers are. And stuff at the top has to come to the bottom, stuff at the bottom has to come to the top. And that needs to be a very effective communication loop. And so we can do better, we must do better, and to ensure healthy ecosystem growth. So things in 2022 are less about when and they're more about how and why, and they're more about who in this respect, because there's so many actors doing things, and there's so much momentum and work that's in Cardano. It's very important to keep all these things organized, and that's going to be the great